Our speaker today, I've been very excited about him being able to share for a long time. And I'm somewhat excited to be able to hear his message and kind of sharing about the state of the union of the sports in our area, as well as some of the panel that he has to be able to come up and share with him. But probably the biggest reason that I'm excited for him to be able to speak is just because of who he is, and really just for his character. And so our speaker today is the Regional Director of Fellowship of Christian Athletes in our area. And I met Tim actually at a Leading with Power event. It was really probably the first time that we had talked last fall. Had a really good conversation. We've been in communication since and have talked multiple times. And a couple of words that I think of when I think of Tim is vulnerability and compassion. And his willingness to just be open with individuals and be able to share where he's at, be able to share his story, and be able to see where he can help. And so I'm really excited to be able to have him come up and share with the panel that he has for us today. But before I do, I also wanted to actually just take a step back and get real and share some of my story. And the reason I wanted to do that is FCA has really played an important part in my role in the organization that Tim is with, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And for me, when I look back actually at my background, kind of as a kid growing up through high school, a lot of people looked at me as a good kid, right? I probably made some right decisions. People looked at me in maybe that sort of a light. But the reality was, underneath the surface, there was kind of a double life that was going on. And there was some sin issues and some things that I was struggling with that I wasn't really willing to fight. But I was very involved in sports, played basketball, played football all through high school, and had gotten to know some of the FCA guys. And Andrew Draper, who's here today, had invited me to come and help out at an FCA sports camp that they had over the summer after I had graduated high school. And I went to that camp expecting to be able to play some basketball and help coach some kids and things like that, and that would be a fun week. And God rocked my world that week, and I really think that week at Fellowship of Christian Athletes Sports Camp helped change the trajectory of my life and gave me the willingness to be able to stand up and fight some of the sin that I was struggling with, be able to see the importance of really fully surrendering. And I know FCA continues to do that today with a lot of young people in our area. And so I'm excited to introduce Tim Gunderson, Regional Director of Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Thank you, Micah. Appreciate it. In elite competitive sports, the U.S. is the world's superpower. We have the swankiest stadiums, a vast network of university-based sports programs to train young adult athletes, and an Olympic delegation in the summer games at least that always finishes atop the medal count. Our size and assets guarantee as much, yet none of the above means that our sport ecosystem is operating at anywhere close to peak efficiency. To the contrary, we are failing far too many of our children. After all, kids are born to move and play. But by high school, 43% of American students, 43% of American students no longer participate in any team sport at school or in their community. Youth sports has become a $30 billion annual payment by families. That too many families just can't afford. Structurally, we discriminate against late bloomers, kids with disabilities, and those who just want to have fun playing casually with friends. This is the state of the union in sports, the tragic, beautiful redemption of sport culture. Before I get started on actually discussing sport culture, share a little bit about who I am. Again, as Micah said, thank you so much for that introduction. My name is Tim Gunderson. I work as the area director for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes in Northwest Wisconsin. Basically, my territory that I oversee of the ministry is from basically Stanley to Hudson, Superior, down to Arcadia, roughly. God called me out of chiropractic practice, which I had done for 15 years. He had nudged me. I ignored. finally I submitted my life and came on staff with FCA. Sold my practice and came on staff with FCA just September 1 of last year. So I'm a newbie, 6 months in. FCA's mission is to lead every coach and athlete into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ and His church. We are an international organization that has been at the intersection of faith and sports for almost 70 years. Now, just like my own faith journey, similar to Micah's, I was exposed to FCA when I was in high school at Fall Creek. Learned about a relationship with Jesus for the very first time. Submitted my life my sophomore year to His control, His lordship in my heart. FCA had such a huge impact on my own journey, but every single year continues to have thousands of youth and adults come to that very same relationship with Jesus through the ministry of in the impactful ministry of FCA. I believe we are the most impactful sports ministry on the planet. However, before we get going here, I just want you to know I'm not a sports expert. I played some sports, but I am not an expert in sports culture. In fact, there are a few in this room that know a heck of a lot more than they've forgotten, as you say, they've forgotten more than I will ever know about sports culture. But just like when the President of the United States gets on and gives his State of the Union address, he doesn't know it all. He relies on his experts to tell him what's going on in their field. That's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to bring up what I believe is a local expert panel, and we'll just have this discussion about sports culture. But first, I want to introduce, before I bring them up, I want to introduce my ministry team, the experts in sports ministry in our area. I'm going to have them stand up. Bob Lichty, right here. Go ahead and stand up, Bob. Bob's been a coach for 40-some plus years. He's been he's on part-time staff but works full-time hours with us. He does such great work with UW Stout and a bunch of coaches throughout the Midwest. Just an awesome human to have on our team. So we're blessed by that. Also, John Peterson. Johnny, where are you at? He's over there. Go ahead and stand up. Johnny it's so good to serve him. He's been on part-time staff for a number of years, and he just came on full-time staff with us January 1, and he serves Chippewa Valley and a little bit beyond that, several schools outside the Chippewa Valley as well. But we're really excited for him to be full-time and ministering to coaches and athletes. And then our vet, literally a veteran, and our longest tenured FCA employee in our area, is Andrew Draper for 13 years. He's over there. He's in the Chippewa Valley as well. He serves in many of the schools in the Chippewa Valley, but also is our camp director. So we run sports camps and leadership camps, but he runs our sports camp both locally and in our 4-state area. So I also want to acknowledge Mark Hull is here. Many of you probably know Mark. Do you mind standing up, Mark, please? Mark is literally, go ahead and give him a round of applause. Literally, I'm standing on his shoulders. I just had a dinner last night in Hudson for some FCA people that have been involved for a long time and just bringing some interest and hopefully getting a staff member to come from Hudson or that area. That's where we see strategically we can grow. But everyone had a conversation. Everyone that said, "Hey, FCA's had such an impact on me," points back to the relationship and the effort and faithfulness that Mark Hall brought to this area. So I wanted to thank you for that. And we stand on your shoulders today as FCA staff. Let's get into our discussion today. Before I do that, I just want to pray, and then I'll bring up our panel of experts. Bow your head, please. Father God, we just thank you for being here today, being in our midst. May your light shine through us. May you continue to change people's lives and have people, athletes, coaches, surrender to your life. Surrender their will to your will through this ministry of sport, Lord. We just thank you for today. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, panel guys, you want to come up? I'll give you a mic too. We got Coach Matt Siverling. Come on up, man. We've got my brother over in the corner here, Ryan. And then we've got Chase Hoople from Valley Sports Academy. So I'm going to have you guys just grab a seat. And then if you wouldn't mind introducing, just give yourselves a little introduction to everybody.
My name is Matt Siverling. I'm the head men's basketball coach at UW Eau Claire. I want to thank Tim for having me here today. I am by no means an expert in youth sports. I think like everyone here, we're still trying to navigate this very difficult situation with our athletes, our children, our grandchildren, our nieces and nephews. And so just excited to be here to share my thoughts and hopefully not offend anybody about some of the things that I say. So.
Well, like Tim had mentioned, I'm his older brother.
Glad you said it.
He's definitely the better athlete than I am, but I think I have more state titles than he does. So.
Definitely.
And I know he means an expert as either. I'm trying to navigate this world with my own kids currently. So hopefully we can share a little insight into our world and come away with a few things.
My name is Chase Hoople. I'm the general manager at Valley Sports Academy. Thank you, Tim, for having me today. Mm-hmm. I am by no means an expert. I am way too young to be an expert, actually. So I'm just very passionate about the topic we're bringing up today and youth sports in general and just kind of the path they're going on. So thanks again for having me.
You bet. I wanted to just start off with a question. Just why did you join us today? Like I asked you and you could have said no. I didn't pay you anything at all. You got a meal out of it. But why did you decide to enter into this conversation today?
Well, since I'm kind of in the middle of it with my own kids, I think it is an important conversation and it needs to be had. And I think it's good to get a group of people together for one, to realize that you're not the only one that thinks certain ways about the culture of youth sport. And then also to try to gain momentum in how we can maybe change it and ideas and how we could change where it's going.
I have a lot of respect for you, Tim, and I'm excited about what you're doing in the community. And like Ryan said, I just think it's a conversation that needs to be had, and hopefully I'll get an opportunity to learn something. And I was excited about it until I really sat down and thought about youth sports and where we're at and trying to navigate some of the questions that you sent to us. And then last night I almost called you and said I'm not coming because once you start really thinking about it and delving into it, and there's so many layers to it, and I'm sure we'll get into some of those as we continue to discuss. But I mean, it's kind of scary, especially when we're dealing with our youth.
Yeah, so what we do at Valley Sports Academy, we work a lot with youth sports, and youth sports is just, it's in a very weird place where, everyone talks about, being on the top program, the top team, and there's a lot more that goes into youth sports. And what we should be doing with youth sports is not developing athletes, but teaching athletes how to be good people, right? And how to be better at day-to-day skills. So, and that's something that we're trying to teach at VSA is help build athletes, but build better people for tomorrow, right? Because 1% make it to the pros? Mm-hmm. So not every kid's going to be the next Aaron Rodgers or the next Patrick Kane, but they're going to be in our shoes someday. So it's helping them progress along to be the next business owner, to be the next insurance agent, the next doctor, right? And just help them become better people overall.
Yeah, just to kind of, you reminded me about the Bible verse that I wanted to kind of have everybody think about today. It's in Paul, or it's not in Paul. Paul wrote it in 1 Corinthians 9. You guys have heard this many, many times, but just one verse that I want to highlight. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. And, wow, I didn't think I'd be emotional about this. But anyways, as I did my research, I mean, to be honest with you, none of us are experts, right? we're not experts here. I didn't bring in people that are in this day to day, but they're real people that are in our neighborhood. When I was doing my research, it was not hard to find videos and articles all over the internet about the tragic parts of our sports culture. Not hard. And we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, but we want to realize it and we want to address it. Coaches and parents screaming at the children, the refs, others, parents getting into verbal and physical attacks on the court and field, and off to the side, on the sidelines, getting in fights. Honestly, it was not hard to find this material. Teen athletes and older starting to create more violence on the courts and fields because of the pressure and examples they see. Here's the bottom line. I think a lot of youth sports, the tragic part of it, is become more about the adults than it has the kids. In fact, almost a 10% decrease in number of children involved in sports teams in the past decade. 10 years. 10% decrease. That was in one of the articles that I read. More and more children are specializing in one sport. Another article I read was by an orthopedic physician, and he just said, I'm seeing injuries that I've always seen, but in younger and younger children. Training in one sport and specializing is causing injuries at a much younger age. More and more money is spent by parents to create this competitive environment for their children. On average, $10,000 per child per year. That automatically eliminates a major demographic. More and more parents, coaches, and athletes are chasing after a crown that doesn't last instead of a crown of life that does. A few questions I have for the panel. Have you specifically witnessed what I would consider a tragic or an ugly incident in sports? And if you haven't, we can move on. But
I guess the answer is, what haven't I seen in youth sports, to be honest? It always, so one of my biggest things is I love to coach, right? And one of the hardest things to see is, when the team you're competing against, their coach or parents, when they're screaming at officials, right? And I always like to say, if someone can hear you in, whether it's a rink, a ball field, a soccer field, football field, wherever, if someone can hear you yelling at coaches, players, or officials, you are just announcing to everyone that you have no clue what you're talking about, right? So just be there, be present in the game, and just focus on your athletes. It's always tragic to see not only is there a decrease in kids playing youth sports, but it's hard to find officials now. It's hard to find parents who are willing to step up to the plate to coach because there's so much pressure on them to build these winning teams at such a young level. So those are some of the tragic things that I've seen in youth sports.
Yeah, I kind of can piggyback off of that. In fact, I have an example. You can, like Tim said, you see it everywhere. This past weekend, I was actually at a youth tournament. We were just observers. We were just fans. We were watching some of our family members play, and on the sidelines, it's busy in the courts, and the gyms are full, and there are parents that are underneath the basket. Underneath one of the hoops, and the official came over and talked to the parent and just kindly asked them, please move, because kids are shooting here. They could, as they do their layups or whatever, they can run into you. Well, the parent then proceeded to basically get after the referee and said, this is not your place to tell me what to do, and your job is to ref the game and all of that. And I think that, unfortunately, like Chase was saying, it happens too much. We are losing officials, and then what are we teaching the kids? What are you teaching your kids when you're saying those things to another adult? So I think, unfortunately, yes, there are a lot of tragedies that we can witness every day.
Yeah, I've seen a few. I probably won't get into any of them, so we could probably. You talked about what's online, and I've seen it all. So it's difficult to see, and it's not quite sure how we stop it. But.
Yeah, just to piggyback off some of their points, I'm a basketball official, and several years ago, I vowed never to do youth tournaments again. I have no issue with high school varsity specifically. A coach chatting, talking to me about things, great. But if I go to a youth sports tournament and they're yelling from the stands the whole time, it's not tolerable. But it's also to Chase's point about not knowing what's going on. It bugs the living daylights out of me when I'm reffing a game and they're screaming 3 seconds, 3 seconds, 3 seconds. I'm like, you don't even understand the rule. Like, the shot went up. There's no 3 seconds when the shot goes up. So anyways, those types of things just not understanding. And we're screaming from our top of our lungs. And this goes to a point I'll talk about later, but where they're seeing this that allows them to do it. Coach Matt, as a college coach, what is your biggest struggle you experience with your athletes now? You've been a college coach for what?
Head coach for 13 years,
yeah.
Which really isn't a long time, I guess. I can't necessarily think of how much the athletes have changed. I've been fortunate to be at Eau Claire for 11 years, and we get really great kids at Eau Claire, and because it's such a great university, we don't necessarily had to deal with too many guys or athletes that want to transfer if they stop playing basketball, and I'm speaking basketball specific. So we've been fortunate in that area, and when they do decide not to play, they typically stay at Eau Claire, and they're not going somewhere else to play, and that's a credit to the university and this community that student athletes that come here want to stay here. I think one of the biggest things that we've seen across the board in college athletics, and I think it mirrors what's happening in society, is the mental health of our student athletes. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I've seen in the last 5 years. And part of it's obviously COVID, but there's also some underlying factors that are playing into this. But student athletes who come to college with tremendous amount of pressure to perform at a high level, and when they're not able to do that, when they go into a situation where they may not be the best athlete and they're competing against people that are older and maybe better, and the pressure's coming from somewhere, whether it's internal or whether it's coming from the coaches they've had or whether it's coming from their parents who've spent a tremendous amount of money, $10,000 a year, on their student athlete so they can be the best, and they end up at a Division III school, which sometimes is looked down upon, that it's not the best, you're not getting a scholarship. I think it's just really weighing on our student athletes at the college level.
I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to just ask a question for Chase here a second. As the general manager of a new and popular sports complex in the area, actually, you already answered this question, sorry. I'll ask this one. Many college and professional coaches and scouts talk about the issues of sports specialization at a young age. How do you see that playing out at VSA? Is that a norm across all club culture, what you guys do, versus what all club culture is?
Yeah, so I think way too many kids now specialize. I grew up, I think I played pretty much everything I could under the sun, and I was just taught to compete in everything I did, just be competitive, whether it's, I remember being the kid who would lose a card game with my uncles, and I would run out of the room screaming and crying. But getting back to sports here, way too many kids specialize, and something that we push at VSA is we have hockey, soccer, baseball, softball. We're introducing lacrosse to the area. We're starting out football, and we push kids to play multiple sports, right? And I think it's okay for kids to have a favorite sport that maybe they put most of their time in. Like if my favorite sport growing up was hockey, so you were going to see me shooting pucks over playing catch with a baseball or going to a batting cage. I think that's perfect, but I still played baseball because, number one, if you specialize in sports, you're more prone to injury. Number two, by playing multiple sports, I'm meeting new people, I'm still being competitive, I'm learning new skills, and I'm learning from different people as well. where if you're playing that same sport constantly, at some point too, kids are going to get burned out. So something that we do with our programs is, an example is our summer skills hockey program. So it's a 10-week program. Kids are in there 3 days a week. So for the first 2 days, it's hockey focused. We're working on skill development, on ice, off ice, and then what we're doing on the third day is the off ice portion. They rarely play hockey. So what we're doing is we're playing football, we're playing kickball, we're playing wiffle ball, we're playing soccer. So that way it's fun for the kids so they don't get burned out. And I think that's kind of a big thing, and I'm sure at the college level you see it too with kids who specialized in basketball their whole life, is that they get burned out the older they get. So I think sports specialization happens way too much at too young of an age now, and it's definitely something at VSA that we're trying to get rid of.
So Ryan, as a parent, I've heard and seen you struggle with the pressures of putting your kids in sports year-round and even doubling up on sports in certain times of the year. Tell me what you see as some of the pitfalls parents have regarding their children participation in so much competition.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to judge, or to feel out your kid to see how much is too much and how much they can handle. And every kid's different, of course. But one of the things is that, like you had mentioned before, injury is a concern. So specializing in one sport or playing one sport year-round, injury is obviously a concern, and one of the things we think about. The other thing I think about, is when do kids have time to rest? If you're playing multiple sports, there are times when kids will be playing their regular season would be basketball, for instance, and there'll be club, like for girls, there'll be club volleyball going on at the same time. So you're playing a full basketball schedule, and then on the weekends you're doing, club volleyball stuff at night. So when these kids have time to rest, when you have that opportunity to, sit down as a family and have dinner and discuss what's going on in their lives. That's the hard thing in the balancing act, because kids want to play, right? From a young, you kind of get sucked in when they're young, because kids want to play. They just, in general, they want to play, and their friends are playing, so you're like, yeah, let's go play, and then it kind of just snowballs from that. And you really have to be cognizant of how they're feeling and how much is too much. For instance, a year ago, my son, he's an 8th grader this year, but he was a 6th grader, I guess it was. He loves basketball. That's probably his favorite sport. Probably his favorite sport, but he does play multiple sports. So he played his basketball season and then did some AAU stuff after the season. And about middle of the summer, he came to me. It was right before their last tournament, and he just came to me and said, "Dad, I don't want to play." And that kind of really hit me. It's like, he loves basketball, and that was a sign to me that it's too much. And so since then, we've backed off on doing the extra stuff. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard to judge, how much is too much and how much is enough.
Yeah. I think of a lot of times I've listened to Mark Hall actually talk about this topic specifically about play. And you mentioned that the kids want to play. They do. They want to play and not necessarily always compete, right? So we start competition at a younger and younger age than maybe ever before. And so that it turns into competition much quicker, and they lose the aspect of play, which is what they ultimately were wired for, is play. Yeah.
Can I touch on that real quick?
Yeah.
I'll share a story. My daughter, 4th grade, was playing basketball. They had her in a few tournaments. I think it was 2 or 3. And the coach did a phenomenal job. It was just with the girls. And he picked up another tournament, and he sent an email to all the parents and said, "I picked up this other tournament, and this one is more of a fun type tournament." And that hit me right. It was actually right after you asked me to speak. And I thought to myself, never once did I go to any of these tournaments thinking that this was supposed to be not fun. And yet, in his mind, and I don't think he did it on purpose, and I don't think he felt that way at all. I just think in his mind and the pressure he was probably feeling from parents or from whoever, is that these other tournaments, they were trying to win, and then this fourth tournament was more of a fun type tournament. And I thought every tournament these kids should be for fun. It has nothing to do with winning medals or ribbons or anything like that. And you talked about play, and you're right. We put them into competition earlier and earlier and earlier, and really focus on the outcome rather than their experience as a whole.
And we're going to get moving on here shortly, but one last story I heard today, actually. I was on a call with our regional director. He oversees 4 states, and his son is a 7th grader. And he coaches his son's team, who in Minnesota you have A teams, B teams, and C teams. And his team, actually there's 2 C teams, and they're C2. So they're like, that level, right? So they're going for this state tournament. You guys have maybe experienced this before. State tournament for all of Minnesota or whatever. And you put in this information, you get placed into a certain tier. There's 13 tiers in 7th grade basketball. And every one of those tiers has a state champion, right? So they get placed, rightly so, as he says, in the 13th tier. I'm like, so if you win the 13th tier, you guys going to like hoist the trophy and stuff like that? And I think that's just a picture of what we've developed for kids and athletes. And I just think that it relates to, honestly, kind of some of the tragedy that we have. I want to finish with this quote. So goes the all too common narrative for American youth these days, an adult-driven, hyper-competitive race to the top in both academics and athletics that serves the needs of adults but rarely kids. While the race has a few winners, the course is littered with scarred psyches of its participants, mental health. We have a generation of children that have been pushed to achieve parental dreams instead of their own and prodded to do more and more and more and better, better, better. The pressure and anxiety is stealing one thing our kids will never get back, their childhood. All right, let's move on to the beautiful and redemptive parts of sport culture, because they exist. They really do. Oftentimes, back one slide here. It's very easy to sit in that tragic lane. As you can see from news media, and when I do a Google search on this, it's all negative things. However, just because they put out that information doesn't mean that beautiful and redemptive things don't happen in sport culture. So let's move into that and talk about that a little bit. I want you guys, if you could share a story that you've experienced that is beautiful, that shows how sports can be beautiful in people's lives, how it can be healthy, and ultimately even be point people towards Christ. So, you guys have any stories on that? I have a few if you don't.
So this story is a couple of years ago. So I coached so in hockey, the winter's your regular season, the spring's kind of the off season. So we put this team together, and it was a mix. We had kids who could do things with a hockey puck that high school kids I coached couldn't do. And we had a couple kids who could hardly skate. So we went to our first tournament, and we got smoked. I don't think we won a game, and I think we lost every game, probably like 8-0. So we got smoked that tournament. The kids were down, and we had practice again that next Tuesday, and the kids came, and we just had a blast. We played mini games the whole time. The kids loved it. They competed. They had fun. They didn't want to get off the ice. Whenever a kid doesn't want to get off the ice, that's what makes me happy, because it means they want to be there, right? We go to our next tournament. I think we won our first game. We won our second game. We get into the third place game, and the kids are just having a blast. We ended up winning, and when that final buzzer went off, sticks are flying in the air, helmets are flying in the air. They hoisted the trophy like it was the Stanley Cup. And the reason I think that's the beauty of youth sports is because we weren't there to be competitive or to win, but the kids were just having a blast. And to see them celebrate that third place game like it was like they just won the Stanley Cup, the World Championship, it was something truly beautiful in youth sports and just kids having fun and just being in the moment with their best friends. So that's kind of the beauty story that I have for you.
That can actually made me think of a story, and it's actually about my brother. It was his senior year of football season, and I was in college at the time, but I happened to be back for this football game, and he was the running back for Fall Creek, and he got the handoff. It was like first and goal, I think, from the 10 or somewhere in there. Anyway, got the handoff. They ran the ball up the middle, and looked like any other play except my brother didn't get up, and he was laying on the ground, and I knew something. I mean, that's not like him. He was always the tougher kid in our family, and it ends up that he tore his ACL, and here he was in his senior year. He could have gone two directions, right? Could have said, well, forget this sport thing, I'm going to go party or whatever. But he didn't. He stayed with his team and became closer and stronger in his faith. And he became that secondary coach on the sideline for his teammates. And I think that's, and you see examples of that all the time. Kids get hurt. Look at Paige Beckers from UConn. Gets hurt 2 years in a row. Their star player. She's on the sidelines and still trying to making the best of things and helping her fellow teammates. So I think that is a side of sport that you can connect with individuals that way as well.
UW Whitewater lost their point guard last summer. He passed away at camp. He was going to be a sophomore, and those guys rallied together. They're playing in the Sweet 16 this weekend, and I don't think anybody thought that team was gonna do that. And credit to Coach Miller and what he's done with that group of young men, and they've involved that young man's mom and his family throughout this entire journey. And it's one of those things where a tragedy has really brought a group together, and they've taken it and ran with it. And I look at that, and it's just I have a tremendous amount of respect for Coach Miller and what he's done and being able to handle a situation like that and rally around something like that. And I know those kids they're going to remember this year probably for the rest of their life, regardless of what happens. And I think that's the beauty of sport, is the friendships and the lifelong memories that you build with individuals that have nothing to do with whether you won or lost the game.
That's so true. That reminds me of also, this last football season, at the professional level, DeMar Hamlin and just what happened there and everything that surrounded that after that tragedy. I think there's beauty in that. And I think they would even, as a family, would agree to that. Here's a few other stories that I just wanted to share, because what really tugs at my heart is a team manager that is with the team all season long, never gets in a game, but in the end of the season they put them in, and the fans, their teammates are just going crazy because they want them to score or make a play or whatever, get a hit. And those beautiful moments I love. Here's a story that came out of actually Kentucky, but a high school sophomore is celebrating with his team after hitting a championship-winning shot. Now, I would have showed you this video, but news doesn't allow you to kind of steal their stuff. So, Gallatin County sophomore Matt Griffin hit the game winner as time expired to help his team become district champs. It was amazing, Griffin said. Words can't describe it. They entered the game 11-17 with 3 losses, specific losses already to this team. But last week it was Griffin's team cutting down the net as it was his new family smiling the biggest. The teenager had been living in a foster home until last year. He was living with a foster parent. He was going to get put out of that foster home, and my father, who was the head coach's dad, took him in. He's like, he's going to be put out, and no one's taking him in, so he took him in. And they adopted him on Valentine's Day just before this game-winning shot. And it's just such a beautiful moment, a beautiful picture of what sports can be, right? Being involved in that sports culture, being involved in that team, and how a kid can be adopted out of foster care with that. It's just so beautiful, I think. So we need to highlight these more. Another story that I read, and this is where I want to kind of move us as we finish and close here. At the mention of the Oklahoma softball program, two things come to mind: winning and Jesus. On the softball diamond, the Sooners completed a 5-game sweep of 5 different opponents. Meanwhile, in a pool doubling as a baptismal font, redshirt freshman Quincy was baptized on Saturday after committing her life to Christ. She says, "Yesterday I made the best decision ever. I surrendered to Christ, and He has changed my life for the better. Christ placed me at Oklahoma and has surrounded me with some of the best teammates and God-loving people. I am so happy I was able to share this moment with some of my favorite people. Jesus gave His life for us." Yet as much as Quincy has developed as a softball player during her time at Norman, the development God has brought about her faith is far greater. And she's simply the latest Sooner to be impacted by how God has worked in the program. Now listen to this. Oklahoma's Christ-centered culture all begins with legendary coach Patty Gasso. Gasso details how, as her own faith in Christ grew during her early years at Oklahoma, she began to offer optional Bible studies for players and give glory to God in post-game media interviews. She recalls how freeing it was to acknowledge her Lord and Savior in the front of the world, and she never looked back. Oklahoma softball has done more winning on the field than anyone else in the past 10 years. And the Sooners accomplish it with a team culture that values Christ above all else. I think that is beautiful, and that is redemptive. And as I speak from FCA's standpoint, again, our mission is to influence, to lead every coach and athlete into a growing relationship with Christ and His church. We have great responsibility, not just as a staff, to pour into coaches so that we can have more coaches like Coach Siverling or others that care deeply about their players and want to develop a culture that is caring, that shows Christ to them. And so, as an FCA staff, this is what we focus on. But, as you know, we can't reach them all. And we won't reach them all. But some of you sitting in this room may have an opportunity to influence a parent, a coach, a grandchild that's an athlete. I'm encouraging you to step back into the game. Sports needs you back in the game. Even if it's just discipling, that's a big role. But discipling a coach, discipling a parent, maybe it's your child, discipling your athlete so that they can have the tools and resources necessary to have a Christ-centered life. And really, that's how you can turn. We're not going to change, sports culture in a day, but how we can change over a long period of time is just by affecting the ones we have influence over. So I want to encourage you guys to get back in the game because it's a great opportunity to point people to Christ in those sport environments. So, in closing, I just want to say, Billy Graham once said, "A coach will impact more people in 1 year than the average person will in an entire lifetime." So who's coaching the coach? Who's coaching the coach? FCA, we work to coach the coach. But we need advocates and teammates and people to help with that as well. You can do it on your own. You can do it in your own homes. You can do it in your own churches, things like that. I think it's super important to not disengage from sports culture because we think it's not going well, but to engage and get back in the game. So thank you for your time today. I know we didn't get quite as many questions as I wanted to, but I know we're running against the clock here. So feel free to ask afterwards. Come up to us. I'm assuming you guys have a little bit of time. Apologize I didn't get you guys to talk quite as much, but thank you so much for coming today. So you got any more, Micah?
Thank you guys for being willing to share. Tim, thank you for your time that you put into this. Hope that was an encouragement to everyone, whether you're parent, grandparent. Hopefully this was helpful and encouraging to you. At Leading with Power, we've talked a lot about this book in the past, The Heart of a Warrior. And I know we've given out a lot of copies to people before, but the author, Michael Thompson, is actually joining us next month for Leading with Power. And so Michael Thompson will be our speaker next month. And again, as a reminder, that's going to be at River Prairie Center in Altoona. If you are not signed up for our email list, make sure to go on our website, get signed up for that so you get reminders about the lunches, get the address for River Prairie Center. We'll also share that on our Facebook page, so if you wouldn't mind sharing that as well, just so we can get the word out about the new change in location. As a reminder, too, make sure to get signed up that Friday beforehand just to be able to be entered into door prizes. And that is all we have today. So you don't need to go home, but you can't stay here. Have a great rest of the week.